Morning everyone, we're going to have a look at the solution for the plunger that goes through the syringe. I'm going to show you a model plan that I did, and I'm also going to take you through the steps for Inventor that explain how the model plan links with the Inventor model, if that makes sense. Obviously there's more than one way to do this, so I've just said be aware there's more than one way. The simplest way to do it is the way that I did it. As far as I'm aware, I can't think of a simpler way. The other thing I'd say before we start is that if you were using Onshape and you were doing this at home, then Onshape works just ever so slightly different than the 3D modelling that we use. And I'll try and explain that. If I remember to do it, I'll try and explain it as we go through this PowerPoint. So let's get started. This was the overall drawing that you had. On the left hand side was the body of the syringe, and I've put a previous little clip on about that, and I went through my model plan, how I would make that. And your task was to look at the plunger, which is the brown part on the right hand side, and if you could also manage to do the seal, which is the centre part, and that little seal just fits round the base of the plunger, and that's what helps the syringe push whatever it is that's in the syringe out the end of it. Okay, with that we'll move on. So our task was to come up with a model plan, and this was mine. It looks a little bit rough and ready. That's what model plans are supposed to be. They're not supposed to be perfect works of art. There is a slight little error in mine. Those that are a bit sharp-eyed will see that this diameter down here isn't quite right, and I'll come back to that as we go through. So it just goes to show that we're all human and we all make little errors. Let's look at it in detail then. It's a plunger we're aiming for, and what we've got is, if my mouse will work, here's our shape here with the various diameters and heights on it. One thing that was missing from it was the distance between here and here, the diameter of this connecting rod, and that was my mistake. I never put it on, but what I did was I just made an assumption that that looked like it was about 5 millimeters. So I made a little guess on that. First thing to do is, do we have all the information that we need? Well, we've got all the heights because I can see them here. I've got a detail view down here which enlarges this part, so that if I need the height of this part between here and here, I can go to my detail view and I can see that that's 2 millimeters. This little fillet part, the little semicircle, I can see down here that that's got a radius of 2, and we'll just bear in mind that Inventor likes diameters, so that will be a diameter of 4 when we come to actually do it. I've got all the various heights. The only thing that you perhaps looked at and thought, well, there's a diameter missing, is the diameter of this top part. So the diameter going from here across to here. Now it's not missing, but it is a little bit tricky to work out, and to find it out you had to go to this detail view. And what that says is, these little grips here have got a radius of 1 millimeter. There are 16 of them, and this is the important part, they're on a 15 millimeter PCD. Now what PCD simply means is that the centres of these little circles that go all the way around are on the diameter of a circle, which has got a 15 millimeter diameter itself. So imagine this without the little cutouts in it, without the little grips, we've got a 15 millimeter diameter circle. And PCD just means that the centres of these little circles all land directly on the circumference of this bigger circle, which has got a 15 millimeter diameter. So therefore we do have all the information. We know that the diameter of these larger circular parts here are 21 millimeters, and we know that this now has got a diameter of 15. And we have all the heights that we need. Now to do this, I immediately thought about doing a revolve. It's possible to do it in other ways, but it's a bit more complex. I did this doing just 3 3D commands, which is about as efficient as I think it could be. So let's have a look and we'll see how I did it. What I did was took a sketch of 1/2 of it. And I took all my sizes from that previous drawing, so everything that's on here is pretty much as it was on the other drawing. The only bit that I've done is I've included the 15 millimeter diameter circle at the top. So I've included that in my sketch. But whenever I got responses back from people, what they had done was stop short. They hadn't done that part there. They had stopped here and their sketch stopped at this point and simply went across. So I thought, just to make it obvious that you can do it that way too, when I came to do my Inventor sketch I did the same thing. You look over here, you'll see that my sketch done on Inventor matches what happens over here. Once again, we didn't have the diameter of this central connecting rod, but I made the assumption that it was going to be a 5mm diameter, which means it's going to be a 2.5mm radius, and we can see that up there. I've got my little 2mm radius there, but remember Inventor works on diameter, so I'd have to do a 4mm diameter circle. Everything else which is on there I got straight from the sketch. Once I had created that sketch in Inventor and then revolved it, I ended up with this. If I had put this part of the sketch, if I had included that little 7.5mm and 5mm tall part of the sketch on it there, what I would have on top of here, I would have that 15mm diameter circle. However, as most people didn't do it that way, I thought I would skip and do it the way that you had done it. Which means I need to create that part now. So you would have to have then done a little sketch showing a 15mm diameter circle being sketched directly on top of the centre of this face. And it's important that you say it's in the centre of that face, because you could put it off to the side somewhere. So make sure, if you're doing it that way, that you made sure that the centre of your sketch, you indicated that it would be in the centre of that top face. Once you had done that, you would then go on to say that it would be extruded by 5mm, and that would then give you that part there. What we have to do now is figure out how to do the grips. I kept it nice and simple. I said that this is on top of the plunger. Sketch a 2D profile like this, and I've got a little arrow saying radius 1. Remember, it's not supposed to be to British standard, these dimensions. You can put them on any way which communicates effectively what you need. You wouldn't get marked down because it's not British standard. So I've said put that on there. Then extrude by subtraction to make one grip. Now I think I've made it quite clear that that's going to be subtracted all the way through from one side to the other to make one grip. To make it crystal clear, in case I had someone that was looking at it and think, well, that's not quite what it's supposed to be, I could say extrude by subtraction 5mm, because that's how thick that little plunger bit is at the top. But I think I've made it fairly clear that if I extrude by subtraction, I make one grip. Then use the circular array. That's the Inventor term we need, circular array, to make 16 in total. So what does that look like? Well, there's my first little profile there. And then if I go to the array, there's the one grip. And then I have my additional grips going all the way around. And if you look at this dialog box, we can see that it's 16. And they're going all the way around. It's 360 degrees. And what does that look like at the end? Well, it looks like this. Pretty much done now. Last bit, tiny little bit tricky. What we have to do is create this little place that your thumb would sit on top of the plunger. This is where Onshape's a little bit different. Onshape allows you to put a sketch directly on the side of this circular shape and put a sketch on it. Inventor doesn't work that way though. In Inventor you can't put a sketch directly onto a curved surface. Two ways of doing it. One way is that you could create a plane which is on the edge of this so that it's just touching it. Or the way that I did it was I opened it up the origin and I found one of the planes going all the way through the centre and I made it visible. Now that I've got this visible plane, I can create my sketch on it. And my sketch looks like this. I sliced the graphics down here so that you can see the curve. Remember F7 on your keyboard for Inventor will slice the graphics so that you can see the sketch. The arc goes from one side to the other and it's got a radius of 50mm, which is exactly what it said on the drawing. What do I do with that now? What I have to do is then extrude it by subtraction, and I did it in both directions, so I'm extruding that way and I'm extruding that way. And all I did was put in 10mm in each direction, 20mm in total, and that ensured that I cut all the way past the edge. And that gave me that, which is what I was looking for. And at that point, that's the plunger finished. The last thing you had to do, if you had time, was to create the little seal, the circular thing that looks a little bit like a tyre. To do this, it's a nice simple revolve. Now this is where I made a slight mistake. That should be 10.5 millimeters in there, not 11.5, because the diameter is 21. If I put that in, my diameter would be 23, which would be too big. So I've sketched the profile, said it's diameter 4. I've got my axis of revolve over here, and I've got my correct distance from it. Well, obviously this one isn't correct, but I would put my correct distance, and I'm going to say revolve the profile around the axis 360 degrees to make the final solid. There's what it looks like on Inventor. I put the correct size on Inventor. There's my 4 millimeters, and there's the final shape. Now, one person who gave me a response back, they did it slightly different. What they created was 2 circular profiles and then used the fillet command to curve it off, which was quite a unique way of doing it, but it was a little bit more complex, and I think had to be probably the simplest way to do it is doing this revolve. Hope that's been helpful to you. That's what model plans should look like. They are supposed to have the sketch sketched. You don't have to indicate every single command for the sketch part of it. But when it comes to the 3D model command, that's when you have to be quite clear about exactly what command you're using and what you're doing with it. The sketch part, simply take the sketch from the drawing that you're working from, resketch it, and say what you're going to do with that sketch at the end. Hope that's been helpful, and next one we do will be slightly more complex.